live town hall meeting. I'm Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, Congressman from the 1st Congressional District of Wisconsin. I have with me here one of our shining stars here in Capitol Hill, Mia Love. She was the mayor of Saratoga Springs before coming to Congress. She represents the 4th District of Utah. And what I want to do is start off by introducing Mia, and then we're going to take questions from folks on Facebook. But what we want to talk about today is the first plank in our Better Way agenda. I'm holding this still so everybody can see this. If you want to see it in detail, go to better.gop, and you can look at what we're proposing as a better way to solve our country's biggest problems. The one we wanted to talk about today is poverty. Is what can we do to go after root causes of poverty? What can we do to have a better plan to confront poverty and produce upward mobility and attack these issues? Mia is one of our more insightful leaders in this area because of her personal experiences and her upbringing, but also her work here in Congress. So Mia, I just want to start off by introducing you. Thank you for joining us today, but also tell us about your thoughts on poverty. What have you learned, not just from your upbringing, but what have you learned as being a congresswoman from Utah on better ways of confronting poverty?
Well, thank you. I have to say how excited I am to be here. This is long overdue, and I'm so glad that we have a leader that is willing to tackle tough issues. As you all know, I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. As a matter of fact, my parents immigrated to the United States with just $10 in their pocket. What's really cool about my parents is that they said when they became U.S. citizens, they'd studied the Constitution, studied American history, and when they pledged their allegiance to the United States, they knew exactly what they were saying, and they meant every word of it. My parents weren't willing to just take on the benefits of being a U.S. citizen, but also the responsibilities of being a U.S. citizen. Growing up, I watched my parents work 3-4 jobs to make ends meet, and one of the things that's very significant to me in my life is my dad pulled me aside, knowing that we didn't have very much, said, you're not entitled to anything you don't own, earn, work for, or pay for yourself. But you have an obligation to help others, and you have an obligation to do everything you possibly can to give back to this country that has given us so many opportunities. Yeah. So this is so important to me in so many ways. Growing up poor wasn't always a horrible thing, because there was always a light at the end of the tunnel. You knew that in this country no one was predestined to be poor. And second of all, doing this is an opportunity for me to fulfill what my dad told me to fulfill, give back, and do everything I can to make sure I care for others. Mm-hmm. So,
give me a sense of what you see in, we've just completed 51 years on a government war on poverty.
Yeah.
The poverty rates today are not much different than they were when we started this war on poverty, yet we spent trillions of dollars.
Right.
So we barely move the needle. Give me a sense of what you've learned just from what's going on in Utah and success stories that are out there on a better way of actually fighting poverty and addressing these issues.
Well, one of the ways that we can fight these issues is really understanding what we're dealing with. So I put them under 4 pillars. First is we spend $1 trillion per year between state and federal funding on poverty programs that's supposed to end poverty, and it's not making a dent. The other way is we create situations where we incentivize behaviors we don't want and punish the behaviors that we do want. That makes it very difficult also, because what we want to do is we want to allow people upward mobility so that they can get out of this cycle and also be able to give back to others. The other thing is all of these programs literally are situated to treat people more like liabilities that need to be managed instead of assets that can be developed. Education is also a big issue. Federal government, I believe, helps to create this environment where the cost of education is higher and makes it more inaccessible. There's so many different things that we can talk about, but also one of the things that's really important is we can't look at poverty so holistically. Every situation is different. There's intergenerational poverty, there's situational poverty. Oftentimes, a solution for one actually perpetuates the other.
Right, so don't do the one-size-fits-all.
You cannot do the one-size-fits-all. This is why federal government cannot do it on its own. We have got to do everything we can to work with our local agencies, because they know people specifically. Yeah. They know them, their specific issues, and they know how to deal with those specific issues. And they have a one-on-one, face-to-face conversation with them. And so there's also accountability. Last but not least, Americans have got to feel like they've got control over the success of their lives.
Right.
Because that is the driver that allows people to go a little bit further. It is not enough for us to give people just what they need to stay exactly where they are.
Yeah.
We cannot do that. We've got to give people the opportunity to go above and beyond if that's what they choose to do. But at least we're giving them the opportunity to do
What
that.
I'm encouraged by is there are actually signs of success out there. There are models that do work.
Right.
You're LDS, I'm Catholic.
Right.
Both of our churches have actually perfected these models, these ideas about how to customize benefits to get people out of poverty,
Right.
to treat the person, the whole person, and to focus on what that person's particular problems are.
Right.
And what they do in spite of government is try to create a holistic service to get a person from where they are to where they want to be, to deal with their particular problems and customize solutions to that person's needs. I think the LDS Church and Catholic Charities have done a very good job of perfecting this model.
Yes.
And they do it in spite of government. They do
That's
it
right.
because of government barriers. They have to work even harder.
Mhm.
And so imagine if government actually worked in concert with them. Imagine if government freed up the local control,
Remove the handcuffs.
it removed the handcuffs and got the power and the money back to the communities so that they could customize and scale up these wonderful models. That's kind of the vision that is the cornerstone of our plan for fighting poverty. And that's something that I think those of us who've spent a lot of time learning and listening with people in poor communities, with those who are actually fighting poverty successfully, that there are solutions out there. There are solutions out in America. We need to learn about it, we need to replicate it, we need to scale it up, and we need to get the government out of the way from micromanaging this thing to death. That is basically the big problem. We took this philosophy on many years ago that said, this is a big problem, we're going to create an agency in Washington to solve this. And what we ended up doing is we had distant bureaucrats putting one-size-fits-all, cold, systems in place, and it took away the ability for people to come together and work with one another to fix problems uniquely, organically, and locally. And that took away the human interaction. That took away, we call it subsidiarity in the Catholic Church. It took away the ability for individuals to fight poverty eye to eye, soul to soul, person to person, to customize. And so when you take a look at a person fighting persistent generational poverty, which is the toughest one to break, situational poverty is a little easier because it can be just a materialistic problem. You got a healthcare scare, you lost a job. Those are things that safety net programs can help for a moment. But when it's persistent and generational, a person has bigger issues to deal with. And to be able to customize aid to help that person. Maybe she needs addiction counseling. Maybe he needs, a car. Maybe this person needs, a GED or some skills training.
Right.
Everybody's got a slightly different problem. And to have this one-size-fits-all system coming from Washington, it makes it impossible to actually customize solutions that are focused on outcomes. And the last point I would say is, we have been measuring success in the war on poverty based on efforts, based on input.
Right.
How much money are we spending? How many programs do we have? How many people are on the programs? Not on outcomes, not on results. Are we actually getting people out of poverty? And so by changing our whole emphasis and approach to results, to outcomes, and bringing accountability to the local level and freeing up local communities and groups, religious groups, non-religious groups, everybody to be able to be empowered to come up with better ideas, and then make sure that the funding goes with where it works the best, where success is had, we'll get more success. And that is basically our theory in our plan. And so let me turn it over to you, and I think you want to run this thing, right?
Well, we've got some questions, and they're coming in, and so I want to actually get into answering some questions. One of the questions that I can see from Nathan Williams is, how does a better way lift individuals out of poverty while reducing dependence on government?
Well, again, go to this, and I want to make sure everybody looks at this. It's a couple of things. We believe there are a number of barriers that are making it harder, Nathan, for people to get out of poverty. If you take a look at all of our welfare programs, they stack up on top of each other. They create what we call a poverty trap, and we talk about this. Let me describe what that poverty trap is. A person is working hard to get ahead. Let's take a single mom with 2 kids, earning like $24,000 in benefits or maybe a temporary job. If she goes and gets a full-time job or is offered a raise, she will lose 80 cents on the dollar taking that risk, taking that job.
And working harder.
And working harder, and not seeing her
And
kids.
not seeing her children.
So what we have basically done is we have put a tax on upward mobility, a tax on work. And so the result of all of these benefits with their cutoff cliffs on top of each other is it says to people, stay where you are, don't move up the income scale. And so it wasn't designed that way to begin with, but it's what it ended up becoming. So we are now trapping people in poverty. And our welfare programs basically are work replacement programs. They're not work encouraging programs. So by collapsing these benefits in a way that can be customized to meet a particular person's needs, we get rid of this poverty trap. We always make work pay. We want to increase the incentive to work and remove the disincentive not to work. And then make it so that we can customize benefits. And also, we want to break up the welfare monopoly. Right now, if you want to go get a welfare program, you have to go typically in Wisconsin to the county welfare agency. And you're basically seen as a line item on a spreadsheet and nothing more. So they just rubber stamp you through the process. Oh, and also, you have to go to many different agencies to get many different benefits, to get rubber stamped in many different places. And it's cold, it's not human, it's not personal. So we want to collapse those and empower the LDS, Catholic Charities, Lutheran Social Services, America Works, anybody in any group that can come up with a model to actually compete with other groups on how to best get people out of poverty, and then we pay for success. We make sure we see what works, and we reward what works. So we break up the welfare monopoly to have a competition among providers on servicing people and getting them out of poverty. You combine that with important elements like work requirements, time limits, which were the key drivers of the one welfare reform we got in 1996, which did more to reduce child poverty and take single moms out of poverty than anything we've done before. But those principles were applied to one program, and there are dozens and dozens of other programs that have not had those kinds of reforms. So we want to take these principles and these reforms and apply to the rest of the welfare space as a more comprehensive way of fighting poverty.
I had an opportunity, this is something that really touched me. I had an opportunity to visit a woman in Section 8 housing, a single mom, and she told me the story of, everybody was just kind of patting themselves on the back saying, oh my gosh, look how well we did, she's in this, she would be out on the street if we didn't provide this place for her. And I sat down and I said, what's your life like? And she said, my daughter every morning, Monday through Friday, wakes up, is on her way to school, has to hop over 2 or 3 people that are passed out in the hallways, walks into a urine-filled elevator, goes down, avoids thugs, avoids drug dealers at the age of 10, on her way to school. When she gets to school, she's met with metal detectors and a teacher that is super tired. And she comes back, goes through the same thing, and the mom says, I have to tell her stories every day of a better life to try and help her forget what she has seen so that she can know that there's something out there that's better for her. And that's when it really hit me that it's not enough to give people exactly what they need to stay exactly where they are.
Yeah.
One of the biggest frustrations is she felt like it was a trap. We created this cage for her. Federal government, just in essence of just giving her exactly what she needs, just kind of kept her right where she is. She said the cost of goods and services are going up. It's very difficult for her to go into a store because things are just continue to rise. And what part do we have to play in terms of the economy, in terms of regulation that is driving up the cost of goods and services? We're hurting the poorest among us.
That's right.
What are we doing in allowing her to be able to save the little money that she makes so maybe she can get a down payment on a home? We're making access to credit more difficult, access to jobs more difficult, because all of the things that we're doing in terms of trying to help people, we're hurting those who we vow to protect. So we've got to make sure that government steps out of the way and allows the economy to grow, allows the prices of goods and services to come down. Every time government gets too involved in something, the same thing always happens. Quality goes down, prices go up.
Yeah, and you have this arrogant, condescending, one-size-fits-all, we know better than everybody else,
Right.
bureaucracy in Washington that tries to dictate these kinds of conditions.
Yes.
And as a result, we're not customizing, we're not freeing, we're not giving people hope, we're not actually funding success.
Right.
We have basically government monopolies that do not have to compete based on results.
Yes.
There are government status quo monopolies that just want to keep getting funded and keep the status quo going. And that is basically what I would argue is our big problem facing poverty in our approach to fighting poverty in America today.
Yeah. Okay, I know that was long. We'll try and get more questions in, but should there be parental choice in education? And
Absolutely.
Does that help with poverty?
Amen.
Yes.
Amen. Absolutely. For sure. Yes. 100%.
I have 3 kids in public education. I have to tell you that I work hand in hand with our teachers, and you know, I believe they're the best people to make the best choices. I live in Utah, with the state of Utah, or Utah teachers and Utah parents. There isn't anyone that is more incentivized or cares more about those kids than the teachers that are in the classroom and the parents that are there.
We had good experience with this reform in Wisconsin. We started the school choice movement in Milwaukee many years ago. We're now expanding it into other cities, like we're seeing in Kenosha, where I represent Beloit. And it's getting spread out, and it's really making a difference. It's giving poor families the ability to send their kids to top quality schools that they otherwise wouldn't go. And it's injecting competition into the school system. And yes, we fight the teacher union every step of the way, but we're proving that this works. As federal legislators, we want to make sure that we don't get the federal government involved to screw things up. So we have to be mindful of our federalism principles. That's why we fought for the K through 12 education reforms to devolve power back to the states. We got rid of Common Core, and we send those dollars back to the states so that they can be more customizing, and they can do what they need to do to fix their problems. So we are huge fans of school choice, but we want to make sure that we don't get the federal government involved to screw it up. We want to make sure that we give the states the power and the incentive to set it up in their places.
This is actually a great question. I think that this really helps with our college students. It says, how does a better way help college students and millennials? And this is from John. There's no last name, but it's,
you spent so much time on this issue. I want you to take this because
I did.
because I know you care a great deal about this.
Oh my gosh! So again, the increasing cost of higher education is in part by federal government, and the unlimited flow of dollars is really causing the price of education to rise far faster than the rate of inflation.
Right.
It is killing our students because they only have one of 2 choices, really. Either they have a rich parent where they can actually send them to school, or they are completely riddled in debt, and instead of starting their American dream, they're paying the federal government back. Understand that the school that I went to, by the way, was $20,000 a year. It was expensive, $20,000 a year. And I had a half scholarship when I got there. I paid my student loans off 6 years ago. Today, at the same school, without the benefit of a better education, it's $44,000 a year. Yeah. Imagine a student going to school today, how long it's going to take them to pay the federal government back. How does that help people get out of it?
In my own stories like that, I worked 3 jobs after college to basically pay off my loans.
Right.
Back in those days, I showed how old I was. It was a coupon booklet. Every month I had to take it was Great Lakes Higher Education, which was a great place in Madison, Wisconsin. And when I went from 2 jobs to 3 jobs and 3 jobs to 2 jobs, they would adjust my payment with me and work with me to make sure that I made good on my loans. And it was more affordable in those days.
Yeah.
Here's the problem. The federal government nationalized the student loan industry. That place I got my loans from can't originate loans anymore.
Right.
So we no longer have competition in the student loan system.
That's right.
It's a government-run program now.
That's right.
Run by the Department of Education. One size fits all. Default rates are going up. The taxpayer's on the hook for another $1 trillion of liability. Without the guarantee of a job. And what's also happening is you can't customize loans. So you don't have competition in providing these loans where they're competing against each other, bringing down prices, customizing loans, and working with borrowers to make sure that they can adjust their payments. You just have the government, Department of Education, higher default rates. And the other thing is, what happened was we keep pumping money in from the federal government, and then schools just crank up tuition.
That's right.
So Richard Vedder at Ohio University has done phenomenal academic work on this, which is the government is feeding tuition inflation. The government is speeding up tuition inflation. And so what is the answer to that? The answer is to go at the root causes of tuition inflation, and that is to reconnect the buyer and the seller. Reconnect the person who's buying it with the information they need to make sure they buy something that is worthwhile. And the seller, the schools, have to compete against each other on transparency, on price, on quality, on do I get the degree I want to get for a good value? Do I get the profession I want to get that pays well if I get this degree? That kind of information is not something that we have readily available in education, in higher education. So we have a number of reforms that we think are important to go at the root cause of college tuition, stop feeding higher tuition, and give students the information they need to make good decisions, to get value for their money, and, oh, by the way, get higher education to get off their duffs and compete against each other for our value. And that is not happening. It's similar in healthcare, actually, but that's not happening.
The two bills that actually are really, this is why I love this so much, because this is all solutions oriented. It's not us just talking about the issues, but literally how do we fix the problems. And two of the bills that I introduced last year that fits into the better way was one, Know Before You Go, which actually gives people their information so that they can make an informed decision before going to school in terms of how much it costs, how many people defaulted, how many people left before they were able to finish the course study, how many people got jobs in their course study. What it allows is it allows competition between the schools.
On outcomes.
On outcomes. So now a person is choosing, saying, look, wait a minute, I've got all of this information. I can go to the school. It's a lot cheaper, and I get a better product here.
Yeah.
And so instead of it going into, the administration's hands and saying we're going to do a scorecard, it literally puts the decision making back into the hands of the student going to school and whoever their family.
The consumer. And break down the barriers against new innovations.
That's right.
Like online, like being able to combine your curriculum online so that you can basically bang out some of your courses online at home before you go and spend too much money on a high tuition.
It opens up a whole new world where people may say, you know what, maybe a four-year college doesn't work for me. Maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to, a technical college, or I'm going to really study in these areas because I get more money for more bang for my buck. And also, the other thing that we look at is College Affordability Act, where you allow, which is another bill that works with this, you allow the institutions to come together and find out where the red tape is, where government is actually pushing up the cost of higher education. But that has to apply whenever the red tape is cut. That has to actually apply to the cost of tuition and bring down the cost of tuition.
Right.
And so we can solve these problems. They're huge. But I firmly believe that every single person once in their lifetime has to take on an impossible task. And, I think we're up for it.
And you're just the person for it.
I think we're up for it.
Let me just say to everybody, thank you for joining us. This is just the kinds of conversations we're having on showing the country a better way to solve our problems. This is a better way to fight poverty. It's a better way to move people from welfare to work. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to Mia Love.